All right, it's a few minutes after 12, so we're going to get started. Thank you so much for tuning in over your coveted lunch break hour. We promise that it will have payoff for you. This is Wellness Wednesdays. I'm your host, Jamie Korf. If you've been following our journey for the past almost 2 years, then you know that this is a virtual web series where I am in conversation with the brilliant minds at Northwestern Health Sciences University. We've covered topics like Chinese herbs and sleep, how Eastern medicine views conditions like ADHD, how to nurture our children's mental health, entry-level Ayurvedic medicine principles, and so much more. Each practitioner or faculty member that we feature brings with them just reserves of knowledge and expertise and real world, real life application. And so we're just really, really fortunate. We're really lucky to have this platform to amplify that to our followers who aren't necessarily in the natural health trenches, but they have an interest or an intrigue in the subject matter. So with that, we learn a lot in these, and as we will be today. So if you are old school like me, make sure that you bust out your notebook or your phone, your notes app. Don't forget to raise your hand. This functions very much like a classroom where everybody is encouraged to be a participant while absorbing the material from the front of the class. Today, we will be focusing on our body's biggest defense mechanism, and that would be our immune system. It seems like everybody, and I mean, everybody has been on the struggle bus this year, unsuccessfully dodging ailments and sicknesses left and right, sort of just Pac-Man style. And if you, like me, are a parent, it was like just a never-ending cold with a death grip. We would have 1 week off, and then we would have 2 weeks on with another sickness. And so through the various visits at urgent care and, with our primary care, and in conversation with friends and family and neighbors, it seemed like not only did we have COVID to contend with, which we still do, obviously, but many of us were getting slammed with a lot of out of season sickness, getting the flu or ear infections in the warmer months, which is kind of unusual. So, we treat ourselves like little plants. We water ourselves, we make sure that we're nourished, we try to get ample daylight. So we just kind of want to know what gives. And we will find that out shortly. So if you, like me, are a bit nervous to see what the incoming season has in store, let's try to assuage that anxiousness with knowledge. And that's where today's guest, Christina Meyer-Jacks, comes in. But before I bring her on, I do want to drop a quick note that this series would not be possible without our sponsor, Northwestern Health Sciences University. Our longstanding partnership brings about 2 blog posts per month, and those posts are centered on various natural health topics. If you're not familiar with Be Well, we will drop a link in the comments for you to bookmark so you can get all caught up on your reading, all that good stuff after today's session. There's so many thought leaders at the helm of the school, and they are right in our own backyard, you guys. They teach chiropractic care, traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, and so much more. And bonus, they have an on-site clinic. They call it the Bloomington Clinic, where you can receive many of these services, which I highly, highly, highly recommend. And now we're going to officially turn the tables to bring on today's guest, Christina Jacks. And if she looks familiar to you, it's probably because you've caught her on one of the many Care 11 or Fox 9 News segments she's contributed to. So she is quite literally a familiar face to many. She is a nationally recognized food and nutrition expert and the standard process nutrition chair for the Master of Health Science program in functional and integrative nutrition. So with that, let us give a warm welcome to, hi, Christina.
Hello, thank you, Jamie. Thanks for the good introduction. I am so excited to already be getting ahead of it when we're talking about cold and flu season. And I mean, I am biased, but it's also based on years of being a practitioner that nutrition is foundational. So what you put in is honestly what your body will give out. And your body is wanting to give you all the goodness. So how do you do
Right.
that? You've got to give it the right resources. You've got to give it the right foods. And I really love that we get to teach in that capacity. So here's my little intro slide. Yes, I'm a familiar face. I've been in Minnesota for a long time. Raised 2 kids here. I'm a new empty nester, but I've been through many cold and flu seasons. I am the program chair and assistant professor at Northwestern. And sometimes people ask what's the difference between, so I'm a registered dietitian, but people say, well, what's functional nutrition? Like, I don't get it. That is taking evidence-based science information and not just looking at symptoms and trying to put band-aids on them, but actually getting to root cause medicine, using food as medicine. So we take the best of science, but we don't just isolate it into like treat a symptom.
Right.
Look at the whole systemic picture of a person. And so that's what I love about that. I've done a lot of things in the universe, a lot of employee wellness. I even had an opportunity to work with another local company, United Health Group, and help with their dedication to their employees and health. And you name it, we work with sports teams and sports and performance. And I also am a founder of a consulting group called A4 Health. So I'm out there trying to optimize people's health. So I'm super excited. I can't wait for the questions to come in too. But let's dive in. I know you already have questions for me, Jamie. So let's talk about like, what's the game plan on, making a strong immune system for the year?
That's such the key too, Christina, is like prevention. We don't have to, there's just this feeling of helplessness, especially if you're having back-to-back sickness, and so whatever we can do to nourish our bodies, to healthily manipulate them, like that's what we're all about. It starts when we're feeling good. And so that's an attitude, that's a mindset that we should carry with us, not just in the cold seasons, but, year round. So
Yeah,
what I wanted to go
absolutely.
straight from the top, and I touched on this a little bit, but it's been reported that people, and you can search it on the web. There's information out there. People are getting illnesses that are out of season, like they're coming down with the flu or just a really nasty cold in the dead of summer. And we just kind of want to know, based on your research, your experience, like what gives, and is this something that you've observed in sort of your own interactions with people at the school and your practice or whatnot?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always multifaceted, right? And science is always developing. That's one important point that I want to put out there when people say, well, trust the science. Trust that it's a process, folks. Trust that science is evolving and that we're learning more and more, but there are no absolutes. It's an evolutionary thing. But I will say, the pandemic definitely mixed up the scenarios for everyone, including our immune systems and the way that we interact with different germs and bacteria. So being isolated for periods of time did not give our bodies the same exposures that it was used to. And so things are going to be a little out of season because our bodies were used to being exposed to different things at different time of the year. And now we're traveling more, that was on hold. So there's a mixed bag of those things that are getting reintroduced and our immune systems have to respond to. And then I would also say, we're looking at how in general the immune system has been affected by isolation, by high stress, by sort of those emotional factors of what that I think it's going to be years of discovery of what the results are from 2020. And really, let's be honest, it was more than 2020. It just sort of keeps going on. And then we're seeing a higher level of inflammation in people's bodies. So those biomarkers that show inflammation, and those can be from a variety of things. Happy to talk about it from a nutrition perspective, but inflammation is the trigger to disease. It is the trigger to decrease immune function. So when your body is in a heightened state, in an inflammatory state, it is consistently behind the 8 ball on being able to fight things appropriately. So that's kind of where we're at from a multitude of things. Diets change too. People put on extra weight and they're trying to get themselves back into it. So a lot of those factors will lead to challenges in immune system.
That makes sense. And I mean, yeah, it's nearly impossible to just target, one factor. I mean, we were in isolation, we were quarantining for a year. So of course, we didn't really get sick. But then COVID came, we got back out into the world. We're stressed because, we're watching our kids more, or, work is bleeding into our personal hours. And so, yeah, that's such a sort of a hot mixture of things.
Right. I mean, our immune systems really need to be exposed. They need to learn from the environment, especially children. So I think there's a lot of good research that talks about sort of this hygiene hypothesis, really dates back to the 1980s, where we're finding that people who aren't exposed to as many germs, so they're in very clean households, or a lot of antibacterial soaps and things like that are being used, those kids are a little bit in these germ-free environments, their immune systems get a little trigger happy and they're looking for something to
Mhm.
react to. And we're finding more cases of immune system dysfunction, whether it's autoimmune, asthma, and things like that. So it's this beautiful balance that I want to put out there. And there's so much fear and anxiety around germs. It's a balance, it's not about throw all caution to the wind, but it's also we can be hyper vigilant and not give our bodies a chance to learn and to let that immune system react appropriately. It is built to look at things, recognize, learn. And if we don't give it that opportunity, the immune system is going to get trigger happy and it's going to look around for something to
Mm.
attack. And that might be you. It might be your
Yeah,
own body. So something to
right.
keep in mind.
Which is such a smooth explanation for um, the experience of 2020 for many, again, where many of us were quarantined, if we were fortunate enough to not have to go into person. Um, and then, segueing into 2021, which just felt like the never ending death cold, the trigger happy immune system, like you call it. So I love that. That's really catchy. And speaking of germs, Christina, so last year I got more sick than I've ever been. As I was saying, my child joined daycare. So it was just this constant cycle of like stomach bugs, sinus infections, ear infections, like whatever. I mean, you name it, we had it. And so what I want to know for fellow parents out there is, should we just sort of resign ourselves to more sicknesses in that first year or two of having, a younger child? And will our immune systems be better for it? Because, I did get to a point where I was like, how many sicknesses, like how much illness do I have to endure before my body starts to really fight stuff off? Like, am I just sort of succumbing to a full 2 years of sickness? What does that, like, what kind of encouraging words do you have
Yeah.
for people in
Well,
that?
as a mother of an 18 and 19-year-old who were in daycare, I've always been a working mom. I'll be honest, there is a season of illnesses. Again, it's about that body learning, right? So it's got to be exposed to those germs and those viruses for the body to go, oh, I recognize this, I can fight it off. So you get to kindergarten, first grade, and a lot, especially for kids who have been in settings, whether it's daycare or surrounded by a lot of kids, their bodies get better at fighting it. So the sicknesses get less and less. The duration of it gets easier, but it is fighting a good fight in the beginning. And so one of the things is really about giving a foundation of healthy food and sleep and movement. So making strong bodies in these kids so that they can fight off these illnesses. What ends up happening, and I know my son used to have a lot of ear infections. He was the king of the ear infection. He had to get tubes when he was 3, just because he kept getting them. And one of the things too, I had the conversation with the doctor, the ENT doc, is like, I can't keep giving him antibiotics. This is ruining his gut, and our gut microbiome is literally interconnected to our brain function, to our immune system. It is our second brain. It is our second immune system. I mean, it really is. And we don't really give it great regard. We don't give it great regard because we'll throw down crazy junk food and not think that it really impacts this unit, these microbes that really control a lot of our health in our body. It really, what you eat has a direct chemical impact on what your body will perform. And then when we take a bunch of pharmaceuticals, especially antibiotics, it can create a very inflamed gut. And then we can end up with these little leaks in our gut over time. You know, we have a lot of inflammation, we've got a lot of bad bacteria, and that can eat away at the fissures, or these nice little tight junctions, and create fissures in the intestine, allowing particles that shouldn't be floating systemically throughout our body. And so when our body has to fight food particles versus, you know, bacteria or virus particles, that too can impact our amount of sickness and all of that. So it's really about hedging, always running to get an antibiotic or a pharmaceutical, because it seems like the easy thing to do. Yes, I've definitely used them on my kids, so I'm not that. I've used them on myself. There's a place and a time for it, but I really want to talk about, you know, also getting back to that foundational health and really eating whole foods, nourishing foods that set a foundation for health, so that your body can give it the best fight that's out there. That's from childhood, and us included, all the way through adults. Like, we need this level of self-care too. And I am biased, but it is true science-based. Food is foundational. It sets the stage for everything else. Food interacts with your sleep, food interacts with your mood, food interacts with your ability to have movement, cognitive thinking, function, all of it, because it literally is sending chemical messages, either good ones or not so good ones. So yeah, so huge impact there.
That's so interesting that you say that, Christina, because I just feel like we're such a, and I mean, myself, my family included, instant gratification society, you know, like, and I know that moderation is key, and I'm sure that you would agree with me on that. You keep, you know, stressing the word balance. Like, it's okay to have, you know, the occasional spell where you have some junk food, you know, like half a box of Cheez-Its here and there, but really, I mean, I think instead of treating food as sort of an afterthought, like, oh, this is just a thing, this is a means to an end, my stomach is growling, that's, you know, that's a signal that it's time to eat. And then, you know, we all eat very fast, which I know that that's not really helpful or healthy for our digestive systems, and obviously, you know, our immune systems. So I think it's just gonna take a collective sort of like overhaul, you know, of how we view food. And
Absolutely. But we don't get a lot back from either, and a lot of times, healthcare on emphasizing food.
right,
We don't get a lot of encouragement from government programs that help with, you know, more sustainable food systems and promotion. And that's actually one of the things that I'm really strong about advocating, is that we learned a lot from the pandemic, a lot in many ways. And one of the things that we learned is that if we fix food, if we fix how people eat, and we give them opportunities to have less chronic disease, there's going to be less downstream issues related. And so every time you get some sort of chronic disease or thing like that, it's a cascade effect. And so I like to keep people away from that and keep them relying on their own body's self-care. Your body is made to love you. Your body is made to survive and to thrive. It's not out to get you. It isn't. And I think that that's what ends up being a really interesting thing. It has what it needs to help you in many capacities. Obviously, there are situations that go awry, but for the most part, it's not against you. It wants to be for you. And I think that that's the encouragement that I would love people to think about. We got the slide that's up here right now. And so when you work with a functional nutritionist or a dietitian like myself, my whole philosophy, whether it's teaching students at Northwestern Health Sciences University or in my own practice at A4 Health, is it's a one size fits one. And I think that that's important because we can talk about general nutrition guidelines, but just because it works for one person, let's say your friend's like, oh my gosh, I eat this way and I've never gotten a cold. Great. That is awesome for your friend. And that doesn't necessarily mean there's so much bio individuality. And so working with a practitioner and working with yourself, your own innate self, and understanding what fuels you and what doesn't is really important. But there's some other things there too. And Jamie, I want to take some time. If you've got some questions related to this, these are some good general principles around nutrition and immune health.
Okay. Right size your portions. Yep, I got to work on number 8 for sure.
We all do. We all do.
No, this is great. I love the illustration here too. I mean, that just really sums it up so nicely. It is all so very interconnected. And I learned this just like as sort of an aside, but it is connected to our conversation. I learned this personally the hard way. I got sick about 12, yeah, it was like 12, 13 years ago. And it was from taking an antibiotic that was just too harsh on my system, and it eliminated all traces of good and bad bacteria. And it was almost like I had to start from scratch. And it took me about 2 years to feel good-ish again. And during that time, not only was I sort of contending with this sickness that I got, but I was also very susceptible to colds and to, other illnesses. And it was such a learning experience for me that this is truly all so very interconnected. And, nourishing your gut with, with foods, whole foods, like you're saying, and everything else is just, it's so key. And it's such an important building block for, prevention with illness and disease and everything else that you're saying, Christina. So this really speaks to me.
Good. Well, yeah, and that story right there of antibiotic use and then sort of that slippery slope of not feeling well for a long time, it really does. When we change our gut microbiome, when we wipe it out, and there are reasons and there are needs sometimes that we need to take antibiotics.
Oh,
But as much as we can hold back on that, but then if you are taking them, a protocol where you're also taking, look at this, I even have visuals here, but like a probiotic. Now, the research on probiotics is still, it's evolving. Again, there is no absolutes in science, friends. It's evolving. So with probiotics, so there's a lot of good research that it is at least not harmful, but it can be beneficial when you've done a round of antibiotics to start some probiotics to help repopulate that gut flora. But the other best thing that you can do is give that good bacteria a fighting chance to thrive. And that is by eating whole foods, especially those with natural fibers. So that means eating plant-based foods and not ones that say with added fiber. No, real whole foods, not something that's in a package that has added fibers in it. It's again, you're going to get these other disease-fighting nutrients, these phytonutrients that are found in fruits and vegetables. And I know that that's the most over talked about recommendation is like eat more fruits and vegetables. It's like that's what your mom and grandma have been saying, but there are reasons to it because they have so many micronutrients, so vitamins and minerals, but also these chemical compounds that are good for you called phytonutrients, as well as the fiber. And all of these things can really help with the healing. But micronutrient deficiency is also a challenge. Your immune system can only work as well as the micronutrients, the vitamins and minerals that are required to help it operate. And then protein is also very important because protein is actually literally the building block of life, but it is also the building blocks of your immune system. So if you are malnourished or you don't eat enough protein, you don't have the bricks to build the wall, man. You don't have those actual structural things to help build those cells.
What are your thoughts, Christina, on like meat versus getting protein from like a powder supplement type of form?
Yeah, so I work with a wide variety of clients. There is definitely a place for powdered protein, especially when you get it in a very clean form. And what I mean is if you want to whey protein isolate or collagen peptides or pea and rice protein for vegetarians out there. Get it from a source that doesn't have a bazillion list of other ingredients on there that you don't need. If you're using a protein powder, get the protein. You don't need all the other things that are in there. And there can be a lot of things that could actually be irritating to your body and cause more inflammation. So for my athletes, they don't have enough time in the day and their calorie needs are really, really high. So protein supplementation in addition to food is often recommended. People who are coming off of surgery, anybody who has trouble actually eating, right? So the swallowing, eating, things like that, there's definitely a place for that. There are also people who just have time constraints in general, where I'd rather see them eat a clean protein powder than be like, screw it, right? Like, so there's that. I do think that eating food in its whole form, original form, is always the best way to go. The problem is that our food system isn't as clean and nourishing as we want it to be anymore. So I am an omnivore, which means I eat all the foods I love. I mean, I was a weird little kid. I would eat frozen peas as a dessert. Clearly, I was meant to be a dietitian, I think, with that in there.
If we were really good friends, this is the part in the conversation where I would call you a nerd.
Yeah, totally. I'm totally a nutrition nerd from the start. I'm also a meat eater. And so I think everybody has an individual choice in how they do any of their health behaviors, right? So I love working with people who want to be plant-based, want to be vegan. There's so many, like, that's such a healthy way to go too. Meat or animal protein, especially as we continue to redefine our food system that is grown in a regenerative way. So regenerative farming, grass-fed beef, and not just the word organic, because that's sort of overused at this point, but there are farms that actually use the animals as part of a closed loop system to grow crops. And that's healthful for the land. It can be healthful for the people. And so regenerative farming, I love, if anybody in the audience wants to explore that more, is already a fan. You get really beautiful eggs and meats, and as well as plants on those farms. And you're usually helping small to medium-sized farms. So that's the way to go. Not everybody has access to that or even understands how to do it. But meat is, or animal-based foods, is the most bioavailable protein that's out there. It means that your body digests and absorbs it the best. Can you mix up plant proteins and make the magic happen? You absolutely can. And the beauty of a plant-based diet is that you're also going to get extra phytonutrients and micronutrients and things like that. But eating meat in moderation, and that's what I always say, you know, it's not a problem in the United States or globally that's like we should eliminate meat, because again, everybody should have an individual choice on how they choose to express their diet. But to be conscious of climate and things that are happening, it's, can we think about our wants versus our needs, right? Like, do I need all those animal foods, or could I add a little more plant-based foods along with a smaller portion of animal-based foods? And those are the conversations that I like to have with folks, is that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. And for our immune health, again, it is about finding a food style that vibes with your body. And I've had clients whose bodies do not vibe on a vegan diet. They are literally sick and their digestion is terrible and they don't feel well and they're constantly getting sick. I've had clients who do not do well on animal products, especially meat. It makes them feel horrible. And then they start to thrive and glow when they go to a plant-based diet. So again, it's a one size fits one. But I think we all need to be cautious, whether we're talking about immune health or anything else, when we do like nutrition tribalism. And we basically like say our way is the best way. And if somebody else is eating that way, they're wrong. Well, I always say, are you their individual biological cells? I don't think so. They're the ones who control what this person needs to do. And so it's about getting, we love in functional nutrition, getting people in alignment with how their body flows the best and really finding that key. But I do think animal-based protein has a place in the diet. Absolutely. I eat it myself. And I also, in summary, think you can use powders and or follow a vegan vegetarian diet very healthfully. I'm going to put one caveat out here too. You're getting me on my soapboxes today, though.
Oh,
Jamie.
no, I love it. Bring on the soapbox. Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, I have a podcast if anybody wants to listen to it too. It's called Connect the Dots with Christina Jacks. You can find it on Spotify and Apple, but it's Connect the Dots with Christina Jacks. I do a lot of soapboxes there, but for this, we're talking about protein and protein being so important for immune health. I want to talk about those plant-based meats. So whether we're talking about Impossible burgers or Beyond Burger, Beyond, Impossible meats in general, really look at the ingredients and really do your own research. These are not healthful to you. There's a lot of ingredients in there that are highly manufactured, highly inflammatory. And when we're talking about processed foods, that is a massive ultra processed food when we eat these meat alternatives, plant alternatives that are out there right now.
What is that stuff made out of, Christina? I'm sorry.
Most of it is
kind of like the active ingredient.
Soy, GMO soy is a big ingredient of it. Seed oils, which are highly inflammatory, and then a lot of other chemicals to give the same flavor and structure that you would get out of meat. Okay. And so my whole thing, and I love it, I have a lot of vegetarian and vegan athletes that I work with. I'm like, let's learn how to cook, friends, because you want to eat this way. You can't be lazy about it then, because you can be so healthy eating a vegetarian or vegan diet, but not by eating a bunch of packaged crap. That's not it. A ho-ho Twinkie diet isn't, it might be vegetarian, but it doesn't make it healthy, and so really trying to work at like beans and legumes, organic soy, all of these, quinoa, all of these have really great protein in them, plant-based. That's whole foods, that's real foods. So if you want to eat that way, I would say, then eat the plant. Don't eat a meat wannabe.
Again, kind of going back to the original source.
Yep, exactly. And that's the way we were built. I mean, it isn't that long that humans have been on the planet. So when we look at our immune system, our bodies, we have really rocked it over the last 150 years and in humanity in general. And our body is struggling to recognize all that we're throwing at it. And so I think the more we can go back to what our bodies innately were used to for thousands and thousands of years, our body is going to be like, thank you. I get that. I totally understand what you're bringing me.
Basics.
Yeah.
My question for you, Christina, and you're talking about, well, I feel like, sorry, I'm kind of all over the place. I have like two like existing thoughts that are like trying to battle it out at once. So I guess maybe I just want to squeeze this out really quick before I jump into the next thing. I feel like in sort of like, so I grew up like a 90s teen, all the magazines, all the media, like the emphasis was on obviously like being thin. It wasn't necessarily about being healthy. It was just sort of like, it was external. And then diet culture was really problematic for a long time. And it was all about, eat stuff that doesn't have fat in it. So then we got all these like fat-free, things in the grocery shelves, like the Nabisco zero fat treats of, the yesteryears, the baked lace, all that. And then it was, okay, you can have fat, but you shouldn't have carbs. So it was, we've always spoken binaries like that.
Yeah.
And I feel like I don't hear a lot. I mean, unless, you have the great fortune of being with someone like yourself or, having, meeting with like a nutritionist or dietitian, a lot of this stuff isn't really common knowledge. And I feel like protein is sort of, I don't know, is it under discussed in a way? Or maybe that's just, I'm speaking from my experience, of course, but I would like to know, like, are we sort of shortchanging ourselves when it comes to protein consumption, Christina? Like, are we not getting enough of it?
Actually, it's interesting. It depends on what circles you're in. I mean, protein for a while has been the darling nutrient, and we've wanted to battle fat fat and carbs against each other, and then protein's kind of like, here, I'm king, I'm doing good. Nobody is like, bothering me. Only in recent years has protein been brought up in more controversial ways, animal versus plant-based, which I just spoke to. And I think that there's a nice balance somewhere in there. So I would say we actually do get enough on a national average, we get enough protein in our diets. Do we get enough high quality protein? That's the thing. So there's a lot of, conventional deep fried chicken strips, where you've got, that, yeah, that's protein, but it's deep fried, it's got seed oils in it. So it's just highly inflammatory. So instead of having like this beautiful chicken that was raised on a regenerative farm and we're baking it or grilling it, right, with herbs and seasonings, that's a totally different protein, right, than what we're talking about. And I don't know, we've gotten so detached from how food is grown versus the consumption of it, but you have to have healthy land, healthy growing to have healthy food. And so I think that protein has been sort of this darling. The only thing that's been thought about it is like, where should I get it from? And I say, demand more of the food system and process to get high quality protein, because our bodies will thrive with, actually there's one thing too. So this is one, look at all these, you could tell I'm a professor. I've always got my little props here. But this is bone broth. And I am lazy and I do not make my own bone broth. So for the folks of you out there that are amazing and make your own bone broth, I know everybody tells me it's not that hard. So I know, but I do buy my own bone broth. And the way I'm using this as a visual here is because this is a high quality bone broth that has protein, it has healthy fats in it, it has hydration, it has sodium, and these are all these things and the protein that's in there is from bones. It's from, that you make the soup or you make the broth by cooking up the bones, letting that collagen that's part of the bones go into the broth. That is so good for your immune cells, for your skin, for your hair, and then you're hydrating too because you've got a liquid. And to be honest, it's getting back to simple things like that, just eating the way people used to. That kind of protein is what I'm talking about. That is a high quality protein because it's not full of seed oils and things that you don't need, and other binders that are, and artificial things that are put into processed food.
Can you hear me, Christina?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So we're talking about food as medicine, and we're sort of saying goodbye to summer. And we're back to, the days are shortening. We're going back to school. We've got holidays coming up. And so, it's sort of high time for high stress for many of us. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to know what your recommendations are for foods that can sort of, help maybe bring back our blood pressure sort of down to, normal levels, and just make us feel good and more centered.
Yeah. Well, there's two wonderful micronutrients, potassium and magnesium, that really help modulate both mood and blood pressure. And so again, we do pretty well in the United States on getting potassium, but some really good whole food sources are bananas, figs, avocados, berries, pumpkin. It's pumpkin season. So, and that's not a pumpkin pie latte from Starbucks. There's no pumpkin in there, or I'm like, make your own homemade pumpkin bread or muffins, right? Mushrooms, actually potatoes are a really great source of potassium. Melons, tomatoes, I've got my other visual here. Nuts, which are a great snack if you can eat them, if you don't have an allergy, because they have healthy fats, protein, and a lot of micronutrients that help with your mood and your blood pressure. Magnesium, though, is actually a micronutrient that we're pretty deficient on in the United States. It can really help with your sleep, which we can ping on that one after, but it can really help with your sleep as well as your blood pressure. So magnesium is found in avocados, cooked leafy greens, dairy, oats, especially sprouted oats, chocolate or cocoa. And so there's a bonus there. And then I do, it is one of the supplements that sometimes I do recommend for folks just because their diets are low, especially if they can't consume dairy, can't or don't want to. So trying to get that in as well. And I would just say being careful about like the sugar, caffeine, processed food train, because that will spike blood sugar, right? And I do like caffeine myself. So there's caffeine in moderation. And then some people are really caffeine sensitive. So that means that it affects their blood sugar or their anxiety more than others. You know who you are. I always say that. They're like, well, I don't know. I'm like, yeah, you do. Because you see other people around you who are like have caffeine and they're just like fine and there's nothing. And then you have 3 sips and you can't go to sleep at night. You've all of a sudden got anxiety, all of these things.
Mm-hmm.
You are the person who should not probably have caffeine. And then everybody else should just, really do moderate it. But the sugar and the processed foods, those are really the things that can lead to inflammation, which can lead to high blood pressure, as well as other systemic issues. Not as much sodium as they'd like to tell us. That's not the research out there.
Christina, one of our viewers popped in and they want to know if you can share the brand name of that bone broth that you held up.
Oh, sure. And I'm not paid for by this company, but if you hear this company would like to pay me, they certainly can. I'm just kidding. No, this is actually my personal brand that I love. It's Epic. You also can find it everywhere, which is great. But what you want to look for is really like the ingredients. I always say, like, look at the ingredient label. If it is simple, then you are simply getting good food, right? So keep it that way. And again, I should encourage myself here. I hear making bone broth isn't that hard. So you can do that too. But there's also a lot of, I shop, I'm local, so other people might not be in Minnesota, but I shop at Lake Winds Co-op, and they have they even have some bone broth in the frozen food section too, that are just really high quality from Thousand Hills, which is down in Cannon Falls, Minnesota. So again, local and, nourishing. So that's my encouragement, and great for the wintertime, right? I mean, oftentimes when I'm having just a moment in the winter and then I think, oh my gosh, I would love to have another cup of coffee or whatever and keep going on that anxiety train and that whole thing. I have really switched over. I don't do this in the morning. There's some people who are awesome and they have bone broth in the morning. Bless them, not me. But I do have this in the afternoon when I kind of need that afternoon bump and I'm thinking about having coffee and I'm cold because it's February and I'm sick of 30 below. Bone broth, nourishing, and kind of gives me that pause, because there's one of the reasons that we do coffee is because we just want to pause. We just want something warm in our hands and a pause.
That's true.
So
That's
bone
a
broth
really
would be
good
helpful
point.
for that.
And because I was going to ask you, if bone broth has any type of energizing components to it that are similar to, not similar, but kind of like the effect of caffeine to us.
Yeah, it actually, no, but it has protein, which is an energy yielding nutrient. So, and it doesn't have carbohydrate, which means then you won't get this big rise in your blood sugar, which is actually fine. What ends up happening, and this affects our sleep, which can affect our immune system. That's a whole thing. Our sleep is so vital. It's such a huge component. Yes, I'm biased around nutrition, but sleep is the other key to a healthy immune system, and it helps with stress management. But you just really want to stay away from high sugar and high caffeine at the same time, because what it does is it spikes up that blood sugar real high, like you're feeling like, I got this. And then what happens, that combo, it expedites getting that sugar into your cells. It's like your body, the insulin gets out there and your body's like, oh my gosh, I got to deal with all of this. And caffeine makes that go faster. So then you get this huge dive.
Yeah.
And you go on the roller coaster again, and you don't want to be on the scary roller coaster all winter long. Wreaks havoc on your immune system completely.
One of our viewers, Sandra, wants to know what your take is on multivitamins. Is that something that you sort of endorse? Do you take that yourself? If so, are there any brands that you recommend or types?
Yeah. So, I mean, you can go round and round on this topic. I would say that our diets in the United States, because of how our food is grown and the way that we distribute food throughout the country, it's a little nutrient poor. So even if we're eating a pretty good diet, as most people say, like a pretty good diet, you're still probably going to be lacking in certain micronutrients. And so I do take a multivitamin. I do not take it every day, and I do not take it at the big like dose. Of course, the manufacturer is going to tell you to take like 2 a day or whatever. So I usually take it about 4 to 5 times a week as a way to be a gap closer on my diet. On my website on a4.health, I've got some products that I endorse, but I would say the one that's worked well for my stomach, I got kind of a quirky little stomach, is Thorn. So Thorn supplements are pretty good. And so you can check that out either on my website or go to thorn.com. But happy to connect with you on that. What I would say is that no supplement is perfect, but there are less good supplements out there. So typically the ones that you're going to find at a grocery store, especially that have yellow labels on them, I'm not going to say the name because it'll be nice. Those are not my favorite. And just because there's a lot of fillers in them, and there's also not the right type of that nutrient, because there's different variations of nutrients, and so you can cheap it out. An example is vitamin D. Vitamin D2 is a lesser absorbed vitamin D than vitamin D3. So you can kind of see the cheap supplements have cheap versions of those vitamins and minerals in there often.
That's really good to know, Christina. And we've got about 10 minutes on the clock here, and I thought maybe we could kind of go back to the changing seasons. I know that you said sleep and that foundational eating, like those are like the two essentials for healthy living. And so now with the sun, setting earlier and rising later, I want to know, do we need to sleep? I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't want to get out of bed when it starts to get cold outside. Do we need to be sleeping more to sort of keep our circadian rhythms aligned with what's happening outside? Or should we, do we need to view or sort of treat our sleep hygiene, our sleep habits differently in the fall and in the winter months than we do in the warmer months?
Yeah, that's such a great question. We all know sleep is essential all the time. So yes, you should be getting in the summer as well. But there are seasonal things that go along with our biological clocks, like you were talking about the circadian rhythm. So when there's less sunlight, definitely your biological clock shifts. And that internal clock regulates your mood, your sleep, and your hormones. So again, being connected with yourself and your environment is good. So when it shifts, you're out of step with that daily schedule that you've been used to, and you can't adjust to those changes. So then you get this brain chemical imbalance sometimes, and that can cause a myriad of issues. So for the most part, it's really good to honor a sleep cycle. Can you sleep too much? Yeah, you can sleep too much too. So when you don't want to get out of bed, again, it's about every body is different. I do really well at about 7 hours of sleep. That's where my body functions the best, 7 to 7.5. Some people are at 9. I mean, that's really what they need. Anytime you're over 10, that's probably more sleep than most bodies need, unless you're a child. Those are different sleep schedules. So we're talking about adults. And so putting into effect whether you want to do phototherapy and get those lights that very much mimic, and there's some really cool ones out there that like turn on ever so slightly in the morning, like a sunrise, and start to get you into that mode of waking up. I think it's important to honor that sleep cycle. And I think it's also important not to dismiss the other pillars of health. And one of those is movement, right? So we can easily sleep our way, excuse our way through not exercising too. And that's not the point. So before, as you're starting, so put the phones down, put your phones down at night. And in that half hour and an hour ritual of going to bed, set out clothes, even if it's, I call them the burrito coats in Minnesota. They're the big, long coats, right? And the boots. And even if you don't have a dog, you can still take a fictional dog for a walk in the morning, and just getting that fresh air, even if it's super fresh, like 30 below fresh, but like just getting that body in movement and having that habit or that rhythm around it, that gets you in the mode of thinking about movement too. But you've got to, and then if you want to do Peloton or you go to a gym, you've got to set that stuff out the night before. Otherwise, it's very easy on a cold, dark February morning to dismiss it. And so you have to make healthy easy. And you are the person who makes healthy easy by setting up the stuff before, so that you can just walk right to it, less excuses. But I do think it's important to honor the body, and it probably does mean going to bed a little earlier in the winter time than you would in the summertime, and going along with that biological clock. We do know that sleep also impacts our cravings and our metabolism big time. So if you want to not prioritize sleep, then you also don't want to prioritize your metabolism too, because significant research that metabolism is affected by poor sleep.
Christina, you got me thinking about, so you were talking about movement and how that's another, essential component of maintaining, a healthy body, healthy lifestyle, a functioning immune system. So in thinking so pre-baby, I was a very active person. After having a baby, I mean, I'm active in the sense that I chase him around. I definitely get my step quota in, so there's no issues with that. But I really do miss, I miss the days of going to the gym and throwing it down on the, the heavyweight bag, or, joining a Peloton class or what have you. But I was sick all the time. And I could have enough energy. I could muster up enough energy to chase after my little guy, to keep him alive and well and healthy. But I guess I want to know your thoughts on movement when you are sick. So say that, you are that household that has to succumb to the 3-week cold. You don't feel your greatest, but you're feeling itchy. You need to move. I know there's got to be a breaking point, right? Maybe it's at the onset of a sickness where you're supposed to avoid movement. I guess I just kind of wanted to know if there's a golden rule around sickness and some type of exercise. We know that it's essential for warding off sickness, and it helps, build up our immune systems. So what does that sort of balancing act look like?
So moderate exercise. So not to complete exhaustion, and you know the difference, right? So moderate intensity exercise, light to moderate intensity exercise, just on that cusp of starting to feel sick, can actually boost your immune system. Now, once you're in the full drudges of being sick, it's about doing gentle movement, and I still recommend that. So oftentimes, if I start to feel I'm starting to feel a little sick, I get out there, get that good sweat going, not to exhaustion again, but get a sweat going, because that's your body's natural detox mechanism, right? So that can work. If you're already in the drudges of being sick, there is, stretching, yoga at home, so doing live stream or things that you find on YouTube, because you've got to get that circulation moving. I mean, it's the same with one of my good friends, Nikki Vanasek. She owns East West Acupuncture in Excelsior, and she does all the meridians and the chi, and basically getting those energy highways flowing, because they do get out of whack in the seasons.
Right.
Everything kind of does. So you've got to keep everything flowing. So if you're stuck being sick at home, then make sure that you're still moving your body with yoga or stretching, or even there's a new movement called functional fitness. So it's working on mobility training. So all of those things can help your lymph system, which is all part of your immune system. So I really think that there's no time during regular illness, right? So I'm not talking about severe illness. I'm talking about regular colds and flus where you can't add some movement in. And here's also my encouragement, because you're on this beginning track of motherhood and there's so much ahead, maybe there's others out there too, is find ways to move inside. Your kids are going to be doing lots of activities in the winter. I raised 2 hockey players, and I will tell you, while a lot of people were sitting on the benches, I was up any rink that had a track. I was either walking or running it. And you know what? I saw enough of my kids playing. I don't need to sit there, and I don't need to listen to all the gossip either, because that's all that ever happens on those benches. So, so you need to just, find those ways at your kids' practices or games too, to find that movement. You got to wedge it in. Your time is super precious these days.
Perfect. Christina, I know that our time is pretty much coming to an end. I wanted to slip in one more question, and I feel like we sort of promoted this in the language around this session, in that's about SAD, seasonal affective disorder. So I kind of want to make sure that we're delivering on our promise and at least somewhat touching on this. I know that it's a very prevalent, very real thing, especially in the upper Midwest with the Arctic temps that we have and the extremely shortened days. We know that we're supposed to be popping a lot more vitamin D than usual due to that lack of sunlight, just to sort of keep those symptoms in check. But I just wanted to know, from your perspective, from your experience, are there any other sort of tried and true tips that we've never heard of to sort of help stave that off or assuage those symptoms a little bit?
Yeah, so immune system, seasonal affective disorder, all of those things are intertwined as our whole bodies are. You're right on with vitamin D. That's a no-brainer for me. If you wonder where your vitamin D levels are, it's a really easy test to get your vitamin D level checked. And so get those checked, figure it out where you're at. But most people would benefit from a vitamin D3 at least at 1,000 units a day, especially in the wintertime. But phototherapy, light therapy, we talked about that before. It's huge. We really are. A lot of people will talk about how the cold isn't always the hardest part of winter in Minnesota. It's the dark. And when it's dark at 4 p.m., Lord help us, right? It becomes a really tough thing. So maybe investing in a phototherapy or light therapy light, I think it's crucial. We've heard about that. But some of the other things that you may not have heard of is, I did speak of acupuncture, and there is some great research on and it's really weird because people are so used to Western medicine in the United States, but understanding Eastern medicines and how to realign your chi and get those meridians in alignment. But acupuncture can help. And then intermittent fasting from a dietary perspective. So intermittent fasting actually helps regulate neurotransmitters, and serotonin is a big neurotransmitter, a big player in seasonal affective disorder. So there's better serotonin uptake and regulation has been found with intermittent fasting, especially the type that does deep time restrictive. So you're eating within only like a 6 to 8 hour window, or by having alternate days of fasting. So that's an interesting one. It's not for everyone, but you talked about what's some interesting things in the research out there. I do think aromatherapy plays a huge role too in mood and regulation. So for seasonal affective disorder, it's really a combination. You can't, and I will definitely say, food is your medicine. So you have got to get back to whole foods so that your body can do all the other things. All the aromatherapy in the world isn't going to fix a mood if you've got a biochemical body nightmare.
Christina, I feel like, well, for one, this could easily transcend the hour into multiple more hours. So we're just very fortunate that we were able to nab you for this hour. And I'm thinking, the more that you're talking about SAD and sort of like this, toolkit of different things that we can work into that to sort of lessen those effects, like maybe that should just be its own blog post on Be Well.
I would love it. Yeah, let's do it.
I'll grab some quotes from this conversation and then follow up with you with a question or two via email if you're okay with that.
I would love it. I
have my editor's hat on.
Yes, I love it, and let's do it because we've got these last few beautiful days out here, and they're precious. And so eat it up, get the sunlight as much as you can in the winter too.
And be equipped with knowledge, before finding yourself in a rut. It's like February, every February, it's just, for me personally, it's just bummer town. I'm always like, why didn't I book a vacation to Florida?
I know.
You learn, but anyways, thanks again, Christina. I so appreciate you being here with us. I know that our followers had a lot of takeaways from this conversation, and I did drop a URL in the chat box for people that want to find a recording of today's episode. It should be posted within the next day or two. And we will be in touch with everybody else in terms of the next Wellness Wednesday. I'm not sure if we're going to do one next month or the month after, but you'll be hearing more from us. And then just another special thanks to today's guest. I'm so happy to have you on the roster, Christina.
Thank you. I'll come back anytime. I appreciate it, Jamie. And stay well. Stay well, listeners.
Yes, you too. Take care. Bye, everyone. Bye.